This is Unearthing Eden, a podcast hosted by two witches where we will primarily be discussing all things metaphysical and witchy. Welcome to our garden. So, this week's episode is on Hecate or Hecate. There's other ways to pronounce her name, but I'm going to be referring to her as Hecate because that's how I say her name normally. So, she was the only child of a Titan goddess named Astera, who was over falling stars or shooting stars, astrology, and divination via dreaming. And then her father was another Titan named Perseus, and he was known as the god of destruction. His name can also translate to the destroyer or the ravager. So I'm going to get into a little bit on her parents because, mind you, during this time, like we're in the age of the Titamuki, which is the fall of the Titans. So Astera was running away from Zeus after he won the war because, as we'll get into the creation lore and everything in the Greek Pantheon. So he was chasing her across the sky, which I think is kind of reminiscent of her being like a shooting star. She turned herself into a qual. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And she jumped into the sea, where she became the island of Delos, which, if you listen to our episode on Apollo, that's where Apollo and Artemis was born. It's a floating island. And her father, Perseus, there's no like real account of what happened to him after the war, but a lot of people just assume that he was locked up in Tartarus, where all of the other Titans that were defeated went. And also, fun fact, Tartarus is both a primordial god and a place. So this was one of the first places to ever come into existence, and it came out of chaos, which was the first thing to ever exist. And basically what it is, it's like a dark void. It exists underneath the underworld. Think of it like a hell for these deities or anything that's not a human soul. That's where they would lock them up. So there is a parallel with this place within the Bible, or if anybody has ever heard about like fallen angels, like when it comes to Lucifer and Satan, they are not stored in the same place as human souls would be. If you subscribe to that, they exist in a separate place. And Tartarus is also mentioned in the Bible, fun fact, only mentioned once. But to move on to our actual topic. So some of Hecate's key aspects is she's a goddess of witches, magic, death, necromancy. She's over childbirth and rebirth in general, the moon and the night. She's also over the afterlife, ghost spirits. So she is known as a sycophant, which is an entity that can retrieve souls and take them into the underworld or take them into the afterlife. She guides them. It could either be seen as she is hunting down these souls and spirits, or she is just gathering them. She may also help broken souls find pieces of itself and restore that soul, and then returning it to the afterlife. So the first time we ever hear about Hecate in Greek religion is through Hesiod's Theogony. This was written in around 730 to 700 BC. And that is basically the genealogy of all the deities. So who came from who, whose parents, like whose siblings with who, all of that good stuff. So in that, she is described as being honored above all by Zeus. She's held in high regards by all of the deities, and she is considered extremely powerful and beloved. And I'm going to read a quote from this just so you guys can get an idea. Whom Zeus, the son of Kronos, honored above all. He gave her splendid gifts to have a share of the earth and the unfruitful sea. She received honor also in starry heaven and honored exceedingly by the deathless gods. So, as you can tell, yeah, she is extremely respected and by other deities and highly regarded. And with that, she was given a piece of dominion over the sky, the earth, and the sea. So there's not really anything that she doesn't have dominion over, because she's also over birth and death, and there's so much that goes into her. So Hecate literally means worker from afar, which is from the word Hekatos. It's an epitaph commonly used with the god Apollo. So we're going to get into her connection with the underworld. She is very heavily associated with necromancy and liminal spaces, which is the in-between. So I'm going to talk more about liminal spaces once we get into the crossroads portion, because that's a really interesting topic. But she can raise spirits and ghosts as she pleases, and she has complete control over them. So, like I said, with necromancy, it's mainly bringing back the dead, not physically bringing back a dead person, but rising or raising a spirit up so that you could communicate with them, or you can get guidance or prophecies from them. This could be a loved one, this could be a spirit that you've never met when they were alive. She has many epitaphs. I'm only going to get into a few of them, and mind you, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce some of these right, but I'm gonna give you the name and then what that name means. Borboraphobia, which is the eater of filth. And this connects her to shadow work. So, eater of filth meaning eating and working through anything considered unclean with the spirit, or anything that you might want to change about yourself. So, if you're looking into shadow work, if you listen, we had a episode on that. It's really the parts of yourself that you push down and you don't want to acknowledge it, but she can really help you open up to those things and working through that and offering guidance to you. Another one is Chthona or Chthoniya, which is of the earth. So, as we said, she has dominion over a lot of things, and earth is one of the biggest things. So, I also associate this with her other one, Pharmaca, which is over herbs and plants, specifically baneful plants, which is poisonous. I do not recommend getting a poisonous plant, especially if you have like pets, you don't have a controlled environment. That can be really dangerous. But technically, she's over all herbs and plants. So some people call on her when they're studying botany. They will like calling upon her while studying that can help open up your knowledge to it. So, moving on, because I'm not going to go over all of her different names. If you want to look up a list of them, we're going to link the source that I used in the description. But I'm going to move on to her association with dogs and hounds. Mind you, one of her names, and I can't pronounce it, I'm not going to try it right now on air, but I might put it in the video. It means dog-headed. And then also she has another one that was just wolf-like or like a wolf. So she is very heavily associated with that primal nature and black dogs specifically. So she's usually said to be accompanied by these dogs or quote unquote hellhounds. And she sometimes even takes the form of a three-headed dog. So a lot of people who work with her, they associate the sounds of dogs barking with her. And a lot of the times, if you leave offerings for her, it's supposed to be safe for animals to consume, or you feed it to a dog. So if you're leaving out food, obviously she has no need for physical food. She's a goddess, a Titan goddess at that. But the physical offering of it is meant to go to the wildlife, specifically dogs. So if you're like offering her something, giving it to a dog can also be a way to offer her, or like getting a dog in general if you have the means and the time. But that she is very heavily associated with the sounds of dogs barking, black dogs, or any dog. And trigger warning on this, back in the ancient days, dogs were often sacrificed to her to appease her during, if it was a time of war, if it was they wanted good crops that year. A lot of the times they would sacrifice a dog. And I don't condone animal sacrifice. I think that we have grown past that. I don't think it's necessary for a modern day person to kill a dog in honor of anything, unless for whatever reason you're planning on consuming each part of that animal. In the ancient days, like this was so normal. A lot of people were trained hunters and they knew how to deal with this, but I do not think that in this day and age it is necessary. There are other ways to honor her and to sacrifice to her. You could give up something that you might hold dear, like, or that something, a vice that you have. I think stuff like that is more, it's more beneficial to you and the people around you and your practice in general. But yeah, that's my opinion on it. I don't condone it.
We share the same opinion on it. If don't sacrifice anything unless you are knowing how to use all of the parts of that animal towards sustainability.
Another part of that is leaving something deceased can pollute certain things depending on what that animal is, or like you don't really know what's going to become of that. Like, especially if you just leave it somewhere, like, you have to know how to handle that. And then also dealing with blood and stuff like that. You don't know what diseases something might carry. It's unsafe and unsavory overall. But I'm going to get into the crossroads and the liminal spaces. I'm going to touch on another deity, and I just want to preface this by saying this deity is from a closed practice. I do not have any experience working with this deity. I just know that they have some parallels when it comes to crossroads and liminal spaces and spirits and different things like that. So the crossroads are very heavily associated with spirituality in many different cultures. I mean, we have like Slavic culture where they believed that the doorways were a type of crossroads. So there could be a lot of spirit activity going through that. There's a practice where you can energetically create your own crossroads. I used to do that. It's complicated to explain verbally, but if anyone's ever interested in learning more about that, I could put something together for it. But crossroads are very spiritual. They are considered the in-between places or meeting spots for different spirits. One of them is from voodoo or a hoodoo practice, Apalegba. He is very heavily associated with like the crossover. He is like the communicator, and unless you are a part of that culture or of that sanction, I'm not sure how I want to word that, but you get my point. If you are not a part of this closed practice, do not attempt to summon him or work with him or anything for that matter that is in a closed practice. It's very disrespectful. But I did want to mention him because they do have parallels when it comes to like spirits and different things like that. They're the in-between person or the in-between deity, and usually the first step to reaching a spirit in the afterlife or to reaching out to your ancestors, which Hecate is also associated heavily with the crossroads, as she is seen as having multiple faces, so she can face in every direction, so she knows what's to come, what's already happened, and what's happening right now, no matter which way it's coming from. So, with the crossroads, they're very heavily associated with transformation and change. And the Bible also speaks on crossroads and the spiritual significance of it, specifically in Jeremiah 6:16, to seek their God's guidance and to get direction from their deity. So that could also be seen like in many different ways, depending on what culture you're coming from, what belief system you're coming from. 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a deity associated with crossroads and the afterlife and that in between space. So crossroads are also kind of associated with the deal with the devil. And just to throw this out there, I don't really believe in a specific devil. I think a devil can be like anything or anyone. So take this with a grain of salt. But there was a legend that I actually wanted to share where a blues singer, super famous, his name was Robert Johnson. And he was said to have made a deal with the devil at a crossroads to gain musical mastery. And it was in exchange for his soul. So the spirit that he met at the crossroads allegedly took Robert's guitar and tuned it. And then when he handed the guitar back, Robert was able to play perfectly. He could play anything at all. Me personally, I just think he was a really talented man. And I think they did the same thing to Niccolo Paganini. If you know, you know, where if you're so good at something and you're not what people think you should be, or like the social norm for somebody who's talented, they will chalk it up to you making a deal with the devil or being evil or something, because for some reason somebody can't be good at something, just have natural talent in it, you know? And like that kind of irks me a little bit when I hear about it. But on another note, imagine being so good at something that people believe that you had to have made a deal with the devil to be that good at something.
Literal
That
goals. Literal goals.
exactly. But I was like, you're kind of taking away from Robert's natural talent. Like, I think this man was just naturally talented. And then, like, and for reference, this was like back in the day, he was a black man, a young black man. And like, people just couldn't comprehend that he was really that good at blues. And like, I think that's just kind of that's just my opinion on it. I don't know. I think he was just a really good artist. But I'm gonna hop into her offspring. So there was some that I could find where she was a virgin. And then there was other stories where she took on a lover, but what could be her children, and this is not canon, is Circe and Medea. So these were like some really famous witches. You can look up their story and read about them. I think they're really interesting. I'm not going to get into it, but they were very powerful witches. Scylla was a man-eating monster, and Hecate was said to parent her.
Can I say a fun fact about she had 6 heads. She presented as a woman in the water in her lair, which was a cave. So she lured men into her cave, and then she had 6 heads, and if any of the sailors or ships or boats or anything like that wanted to pass through, they had to light up torches. Most of the time 6, 1 per head, and you had to sacrifice 6 men.
Period. I love that for her. Let's see who else. Empusa, which was a shape-shifting demon, and Aegileus, and this was the son of King Eetus, I want to say. He ended up being a king anyways. So, and he was also murdered by his sister Medea. That's a whole other thing. But there's other versions of this where she has absolutely no children at all. So there's not like this isn't a canon thing where she had these children, but I would like to think that the famous witches, at least, Circe and Medea, I would like to think that they have a really powerful mother like Hecate. That's such an honor.
All right. So Hecate, her symbol is a circle on the bottom with a line going up with a crescent moon on the top of that line. And then we have 2 lines bisecting that line. So the bottom one is just a regular line, and the one that's right above it has 2 crescent moons on the end of the lines. I'm pretty sure Mickey's going to put a nice little picture in for you guys, and I hope I'm doing a good job at describing what it looks like. But anyway, I think it's a really cool symbol. It's also the 3 moons, the triple moon. So you have a full moon in the middle, and then you have a waning crescent and then a waxing crescent, all connected. And then you have a little symbol in the center of it that I can't even begin to describe. Anyway, the zodiac sign that is affiliated with Hecate is Aquarius. They're very independent, they're very unconventional, and they have a really good connection to the mystical and or magical realm. This really resonates with their need to learn, their need to be independent, and their need to help people. If you ever are blessed with having an Aquarius in your life, you are going to see how they put their own needs over. No, they put your needs over their own. They're going to make sure that you are happy before they are happy. You have to constantly remind them that their needs are also important and need to be met as well, which I think is really fun. So before we go into all of the animal representations, I'm going to list them all out. A majority of the animals that I'm going to mention have a very similar meaning as far as how they represent her, but there are a few that we're going to detail. So the animals that represent Hecate are the black lamb/sheep, the bull, dogs, specifically black dogs or hounds, fish, goats, horses, lions, serpents, snakes or dragons, and wolves. So we're going to start with the hounds. Hecate and her hounds are the most Hecate and her hounds are the most notable animal representation that we will see her with. She's known to take the form of a hound or walk with her hellhounds to search for souls to devour or to save, depending on the perspective of said soul. When taking the aforementioned hound form, she is known as Lyco, meaning wolf-formed in Greek. Wolves are known as fierce protectors, and dogs are the descendants of wolves, as many of us know. Hecate is known to be fiercely protective of her children. Her hounds are also known to protect the underworld and are portrayed as single-headed or triple-headed, aka Cerberus, which is a very nice tie-in to our next animal, which is the bull. So many of her animals are going to be fiercely protective, but bulls are also really sturdy, which is a really good representation as her as a goddess. But at the end of the day, a bull is more symbolic of a representation of her for their physical appearances. Their head and horns make up the shape of a triple moon, and Hecate is also known as the triple moon goddess or the triple-faced goddess. With the bull head being the center, the horns to the side represent the waxing and the waning crescent of the moon cycles, completing that triple moon look. And last but not least, we have our serpents, snakes, or dragons. These are interchangeable because serpents and snakes are the exact same animal, but depending on the stories, snakes tend to be a little bit smaller than serpents. Dragons are their own thing in them of themselves, but they're all going to represent Hecate in the same, if not similar, ways. They are a symbolic representation of transformation and rebirth because they have the ability to shed their skins. The shedding of the skin is a very powerful form of transformation. They're also a very powerful symbol of the primal feminine and the creative life force. Snakes or serpents are also associated with the underworld as they guide the souls of the deceased and then hold dominion over said souls once they make it to the end of their road. Hecate is depicted with serpents throughout history as she is one of the oldest deities as well as the most knowledgeable deities. She's had a hand in all parts of the creation of the world, aka land, sky, sea, and the underworld. Now, with that being said, this leads to her being as powerful and as wise as a serpent, since she is able to transform and give new life. But she can also take it away since she is both the creator and the destroyer. Overall, all of her animal representations are super interesting. They each have their own story and they're each super special in their own right. But it is super easy to find said information about all of her animals that we listed earlier because she is a well-known goddess. Now, with that being said, we are now going to head into our current ways that we can honor our wonderful goddess, Hecate. So, current ways to honor our wonderful Lady Hecate is going to be devotional acts, offerings, and prayers. The best way to do it is going to be with shadow work and meditation. And then we also have Depnom and Numenia. So the Depnon is a evening meal that is observed during the dark moon, aka the new moon. So we don't actually have a physical moon in the sky, but it's going to be 3 different parts: purification, expiation, and a meal. So, expiation is atonement. So, if the household felt polluted or felt like they needed to make amends with Hecate, trigger warning, they would sacrifice a dog. And before they would sacrifice said dog, each household member would touch the dog and transmit anything bad or wrong or anything that just didn't feel right into said dog. And then that's what they would be using as a scapegoat to get back into her good graces. And the head of the household would read the entrails to ensure Hecate accepted the sacrifice. Purification is going to be the removal of physical and energetic dirt and making a clean ceremonial space. It's kind of like they did like a large cleaning every month, which was really good for the household and really good for the soul. And I think we should start that back up. Like, instead of doing like spring cleaning, it should be new moon cleaning. They also collected the leftovers from previous rituals and they would smoke the house clean using a clay censer. And then they would have a nice little meal and they would thank her, and it's a way to honor her and appease the souls. And then when the offerings were left at the crossroads, that's where she would go and collect her offerings. But fun fact about that, a lot of the times people didn't want to leave their house at night because they were scared of the souls. So they had shrines made outside their house, meeting their driveway, kind of like pathway, walkway, because they didn't have cars, but like, you know what I mean, like the end of the road to the house, like bisecting the street. So they would leave a shrine there, and then they would put their offering right at that crossroad and then turn around and walk back into their house, because if you turned back when leaving an offering for Hecate, it could anger the spirits and the person could get driven mad, which I think is very interesting, and I'm looking more into that because I would like to offer some things to Hecate. Anyways, so the Numenia is going to be a day of relaxation, rest, feasting, and giving more offerings to the Hellenic household gods, including Hecate, and this would include frankincense, flour, barley cakes, and wine. It's similar to like a New Year's start. So Depnon is going to be like you're cleaning, you're cleansing, you're taking out all the bad, you're giving it up, you're getting away from it. And then with the Numenia, you are starting a fresh start and you are going to be like having a good time. I really like how some of this stuff is translated into our current day, especially with what we call spring cleaning. New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. There's a, what's the word? superstition where if you clean your entire house on New Year's Day, you're going to go into the new year too fresh, too clean, and you're not going to be able to bring anything from the previous year with you. I personally agree and disagree with that because there are certain things that I like to have set clean for the new year. So, fresh bed set, fresh clothes, clean house, everything like that. But then there are other things where I'm like, I kind of want to leave this like this so that way it stays like this. So I like that a lot. And then shadow work, like we said earlier, we do have an episode on that. I believe that's episode 2 or 3. It's one of the first ones that we made. So you guys should take a listen to it if you're just hopping into our Hecate episode. So for our offerings, we have a few different types. So we have physical, symbolic, and action based. For physical, we're going to use garlic, eggs, leeks, honey, keys, black candles, frankincense, wine, and pomegranate. For symbolic, it's going to be torches, representations of dogs, snakes, or bats, any type of crystal or herb or plant that's associated with the night. So moonstone or darker flowers. An action base is going to be donating to charities, supporting marginalized groups or animal welfare, and or soup kitchens. So if you're doing acts of kindness, anything along those lines, she'll really appreciate that because, it's the intention of wanting to help people and wanting to see people succeed and do better and help them out. If we are looking to set up an altar for our wonderful, wonderful lady Hecate, we're going to want to use a representation of her, so a statue or an image. We're going to want to use black candles, herbs, and incense not specifically, but like you really want to lean towards frankincense, black crystals, keys, dogs, torches, any of the physical offerings mentioned before. And the colors we're going to want to go with as far as cloth is black, red, or white. But we do lean a little bit towards the black because it's going to be her main color. The most important thing at the end of the day is to respect her domain and respect everything that she does and does for us. Like Mickey said, she is the creator. To me, she would, in my own mind, because I'm a little biased, but not really. I like to think that she is what the people believe God is, being the creator, like monotheistic religion God. In my opinion, God is a woman, and Hecate does everything that said God would do, and we know that history has been manified, so to speak.
And there is like cases where I was reading Zeus saying that she is above all, or like he held her in the highest honor. It goes on to talk about how she's the one who decides who wins wars. She's the one who decides who's going to win something, like in general, like a game. She's the one who decides if the harvest is going to be bountiful. She's the one who brings glory to parents whose children are victorious. Like it goes on and on about how much she is over and how much influence she really has on, especially like ancient Greek religion. She has so much influence over people and their daily lives then. And she is not just a death goddess. She's so much more than that. And like I said earlier, she's over birth. She was given that, so she's over birth and death, which is like arguably two of the main things about being a human is you're being born and you're gonna die. And I think she also kind of brings like a sense of I want to say like peace of
Contentness.
mind. Yeah, like where you're just more content and they were more aligned with the idea of death than people are today because today there's so many different deities. There's so many different ways people can look at it. They're like 15-year-olds having existential crises because nobody really knows what to believe. And I feel like back in the day they're very solidified in their belief of this and they were not necessary. I mean, like nobody really wants to die no matter where you're from or what culture you're from. We all kind of want to live, but like there is a comfort that she brings when thinking about death and thinking about the afterlife and your loved ones who have passed on. So I think that
Right.
that's a really big deal to work with a goddess who is over so many different things. She's a goddess. She's not a human woman. A lot of people just expect women to be automatic nurturers and automatic caregivers, and they're never supposed to be angry or be loud. But she can be angry, like she can be so many different things.
And she's gonna show up to you how you need her. That's the one thing that you told me, like when I started my second journey part 2,
Yeah.
is if I wanted to work with Hecate, which I've been procrastinating on
She's very
still.
picky. I will say that she is very picky about who she wants to work with. You got to do your research on it. Building and honoring a relationship with the deity, and you are working with them, that you show great respect to them, you give them offerings, they're more likely to help you. So now we're going to get into the tarot and crystals for this episode. And the tarot card that I pulled for this episode is the Page of Pentacles, meaning you might be very ambitious or planning ahead. You're being very consistent with your work and what you're doing. It could mean that you're being very grounded as well. So reverse, it could be the opposite of that, basically. So think of these cards like when they're right side up, it has this meaning, and then reversed typically means it's the opposite of the right side up. So maybe you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're procrastinating tasks. You might be starting things and then stopping before you even get good at them, or you might give up on different things that you want to learn. I have that issue kind of with language learning. I really want to learn a new language, but every time I start, I just kind of give up in like a month, and I don't really dedicate enough time to it. So that kind of, I can relate to that a lot. So it could also mean that you're missing opportunities that are coming your way. You're not really looking with a different perspective, and you're letting things pass you by because you're so hung up on this one thing, or maybe your mind is set on this one specific, for example, career, and this one specific job that you applied for, and you're not getting a call back, but now you're missing all these other opportunities that are popping up that's similar to what you want from that. But that's what I have for the tarot card. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to go over the crystal.
Okay, cool. So I think that's a really good tarot pull today, especially since we've been talking about how well we've been doing with making sure that we stay on time with our recordings and how we're really just, I don't want to say pushing through, but like we're doing a really good job at staying grounded about this project. And I'm so excited.
Me too. We literally just talked about, like, we have issues with being consistent. And throughout this whole thing, like, this is the 2 month mark, or like 2 months plus a week mark when this episode airs.
Yeah.
And we have been so good at this, even when we have like obstacles that are being thrown at us. Like maybe it's a little more rough some weeks than others, but we really are staying on top of things.
I love this for us. Anyway, so the crystal that we chose for this week is Phantom Quartz, which pairs super well with Hecate. The properties are going to be, it's a very emotionally healing stone. It can help release past traumas, help with emotional blockages and or negative patterns. It helps you find the strength to overcome any type of issues that you may have, and that makes it really good for personal growth. It's going to encourage your self-awareness and help embrace change, and it's really good for personal evolution as well. A lot of people use it for self-discovery just because it's going to help bring that like eye-opening information, details, everything like that. It's also a really good protection stone, so it's going to shield from negative energies and psychic attacks, and it's going to promote inner strength and resilience, and that alone is going to give you a lot of peace and equilibrium in your life. And as far as physical healing goes, now remember, whenever we talk about physical healing of anything, we are not doctors. We are not going to say that you need to use this to heal this. It is just a good assistance, and it's a good way to kind of see another way to heal yourself. So it's going to help enhance your natural healing, and it's going to boost your immune system. A lot of people like hover it over themselves, or like, I don't want to say smudge themselves with it, but like kind of not rub it, but like wave it around their body in a way. I guess that's the best way to put it. If you need to cleanse your Phantom Quartz, you can use running water, selenite, sunlight, moonlight, smudging, sound, or visual cleansing. The chemical makeup. Now, this is my new favorite thing that we've added because I'm a science nerd. So the cool thing with Phantom Quartz is that it's going to be regular quartz, so silicon dioxide, and then any type of additional chemicals added to it because it's going to have an internal coloring to it, but it's going to look like it's very glassy and very like phantomy. So it's going to look there's ghosts and wisps and things hiding, and it's very interesting. I love it. Anyways, so you'll have chlorite, hematite, or more quartz trapped inside of it. With chlorite, it'll have like a green hue, and with hematite, it's going to have a reddish, brownish, kind of like irony color to it. But the chlorite and the hematite, what happens is gas gets trapped inside of the stone itself as it's growing. So it has pockets of where these extra minerals or chemicals will start to become a node thing. It's called phantom quartz because, like I said, it's going to give you the steps of the crystal growth, and it's going to give it a ghostly landscape or ghostly wisps or scenes or things that look trapped inside the stone. I did not talk about zodiac. So for zodiac sign, it's not gonna be tied to any type of specific sign, which is really cool for this type of stone, especially with the properties that it has. Anybody that needs any of the healing or the balancing will benefit from this stone. It's not gonna favor one sign over another. I don't use it yet. Personally, I'm going to after looking it up, and then we're going to get into where you find it because this is the part that I love the most. So fun fact, guess where we're going? Back to the mines. So for chlorite phantom quartz, we're going to find it in Brazil, the United States, Madagascar, and Austria. That's going to be the one with that green hue to it. Hematite is going to be in Brazil, Madagascar, and the United States. That's going to have that reddish iron type of color. Smoky phantom is going to have just dark black quartz inside of it. That's how you're going to get that type of coloring. That one's going to be in Brazil, Madagascar, and the Swiss Alps. And then clear and or white phantom quartz is going to be found in Brazil, Madagascar, Namibia, and the United States as well. Have you used phantom quartz?
I've used phantom quartz before for like I don't want to call it like a seance, but it was more like honoring past loved ones during Samhain. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it's called a dome dinner or a dome supper. It's where you don't speak. Like you set up the table, you have people over, but no one talks, but you set a place and food for deceased loved ones.
Yeah.
And it's like a way to invite them in. So like stuff like phantom quartz or quartz for me, like it can attract spirits. It can open you up a little bit to spirit communication and like enhance their energy, or that's how I used it then. And I think it's really good like offering to Hecate or any deity of the underworld or any deity that's heavily associated with death and ghosts and spirits. I think it's a good offering.
Well, remember, Hecate is literally the creator and the destroyer, so I think she loves. Thank you guys for listening. Let us know in the comments how you used the crystal we showcased today, and if there are any you would like us to talk about in the future. Thank you for coming to our garden. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy our content.